Hello, my name is Dominique Johnson, and let's talk about our education system here in Nashville, Tennessee. So up until the final week of February, the week of February the 24th through 28th, that was my kids' last week at the private school they were attending at the time, Davidson Academy. Last day there was February 28th. I did go ahead and make the decision to withdraw them from school and had to make the really tough decision to move them to another school based off of just the lackluster care, the lack of oversight, and even the lack of integrity within the staff. Yes, February the 28th was the last day they attended school. I went ahead and submitted a withdrawal form for my kids regarding why I was withdrawing them. Before all of this, I did go ahead and submit a complaint to the board. I sat down with my daughter's teacher. I sat down with the guidance counselor. I sat down with the principal of the elementary school, and we even sat down with the dean over the entire school. I could go ahead and submit a form that I was withdrawing. My son was at Davidson Academy preschool. His teacher, Ms. Sherg, she did reach out and, send an email, just her condolences about our decision to leave. And the dean, overhead principal of the preschool, did reach out with her concerns. As far as all the foolishness that happened in elementary, there's been no accountability on that part for any of the things that transpired. Before I go any further, I'm going to be 100% transparent. I was homeschooled my entire life. I've never attended any public or private school. My umbrella school, I'm straight out of private school, which was based out of California. But I was homeschooled my entire life. My mother holds a master's degree. She's the one who educated me. So when I first started going to Davidson and we heard all these good things, we did the tour, I went into it with, some reservation, like, okay, it's expensive. There's not a lot of diversity. Like, is this the right place for us? And, my child's first year at Davidson Academy, I was a single parent. So my ability to attend all the functions and stuff was very limited. So unfortunately, my daughter did go to extended care quite a bit the first year, and I did miss stuff. There were certain things that probably little red flags that I wish I would have paid more attention to as far as the way they taught the curriculum in kindergarten. But quite frankly, I was busting my butt trying to afford to keep her in that school. So no, I was not as attentive as maybe I should have been in kindergarten. Fast forward to this school year, happily married, life is going good. And I was able to attend more of the functions at the school. I started going to chapel every Thursday, and I was able to go to every single one of the field trips. And my child had some academic struggles. She had some academic struggles in kindergarten. And anytime I voiced any concerns about it, they were met with, we'll get her caught up, we'll get her caught up, we'll get her caught up. This was my child's binder, okay? I started keeping track of everything when I realized integrity is hard to come by. So I had to start monitoring things. The academic standard that Davidson Academy has stated, not me, this is Davidson Academy standards. For kindergarten in the August, they want you to be able to identify color words. She could do that. Or name letters and pronounce their sounds. She could do that. They were going to review T, A, B, and H, identify upper and lower case, write upper and lower case, sort pictures by beginning sounds, identify and produce vowel sounds with emphasis on the short sound, identify and produce rhyming words. That was what they were teaching the first month of kindergarten. So I'm not sure where this narrative of my child started behind school and it was their job to get her caught up. I'm really not sure where that came from. Because at the first month, these are all things that she can do, and we go into September. Yes, going into kindergarten, there's some stuff she didn't know, but that's the point of going to kindergarten. She already knew these things. We would have just gone to first grade. So this was the benchmarks for their kindergarten, okay? These are things they supposedly taught her in kindergarten. As I found out, a lot of this stuff was skipped over for whatever the reason. It wasn't taught. So again, for Davidson Academy standards, these are not my standards. This is what the school wanted her to know. For math, for kindergarten, count from 0 to 5. My child could do that. To 10s to 100. She was a little shaky with that, I'll be honest with you. But again, that is one skill that she needed to learn. Use data to graph. She could do that. Count by 5s to 100 and then identify her shapes. So where she was in math, there was maybe 2 things that she would have struggled with. There was 3 weeks in August that the kids attended school. I'm not sure why we were not able to teach a child these 2 things within the first month. So if due diligence would have been done, she wouldn't have been behind. So this was kindergarten, okay? This, where all this rockiness started. Her teacher at the time was Mrs. Fisher. I'm not particularly happy with where my child was at the end of kindergarten. I did voice my concerns, but her progress was, it was what it was. I wasn't super impressed, but it was always, we'll get her caught up, we'll get her caught, we'll do what we have to do. I am proud of the gain she has made this year. I will miss Ayla Rose's precious smile and her sweet spirit more than I can say. I hope you have a fantastic summer and read, read, read. Ayla Rose has been promoted to the first grade for the 24-25 school year. Okay. If my child was so academically behind, why was she moved to first grade? And that's the one thing that I'm like, why are we moving kids up that are not proficient? Okay. Davidson Academy is $1,500 a month. That might not break a lot of people. That was a financial burden for my family. It was absolutely a financial burden for my family. But we wanted this opportunity for her. We pushed her. We worked at home. We read every day. We did all the things that we could do for our part. And we were hoping that the school was holding up their end of the deal. The end of the summer, she still wasn't very proficient. We spent the entire summer just reading. I got her to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not happy where she was. We spent the summer working hard. So she started first grade. I had to request these multiple times. They didn't want to give them to me, but I was very persistent and I finally got them. So Davidson Academy standards for Q1 is count to 120, starting at any number, read and write numerals to 120, and represent a number of objects with a written numeral, and count backward from 20. This was updated in 9/15/23. This is their standard, okay? They were not teaching my child that. They were not teaching her that. So we have these academic standards. Again, these are not my feelings on how kids should be educated. This is what I was paying for. Their whole thing on preparing children for life and school and eternity. They did not prepare my child for kindergarten, let alone for first grade. So now we're in this panic makeup. So I'm reaching out to the school. The grades are coming back. They're atrocious. A lot of my child's work that was coming home wasn't done. Like, this is something that was assigned to her. Why was this never done? So work is coming home and I'm having her do it at home because nobody is, again, this is her first grade work, okay? This is not my opinion. Once again, this is what, spelling, plurals. It was never graded. We have work over here. No date. It was never graded. We have a little check. I guess that's worth $1,500. A month. This is more work. Here's another piece of work. This is not graded. How do we know how we're doing if work is not graded? Work that wasn't completed. You know, you got my kid all day at school, but you're not having her do work. That's fine. You're bringing it home. So after I work all day to pay for this school, I'm working with my child, and then I'm sending her to school with it to be graded, and it would never be graded. So I can't tell you how much work I have for my child. This is never work that was graded. This wasn't completed. There wasn't a date. Someone else put her name on that. Her name should have been required to be on that. Her name is not on this. We have more work that she's done, not graded. This is extremely sloppy. This is not first grade handwriting. This should have been X'd. Do it again until it's done correctly. There should be some accountability. If this is a first grade standard and according to the Davidson Academy standards for where a child should be, and she's not reaching it, I would have appreciated a phone call. I would have appreciated a big fat 0 and saying your child needs to redo this. And I would have said, okay, let's do it. But we're getting home work. I'm not sure what these squiggles are. I'm really not sure. I'm really not. This isn't her name on it. We're teaching the long A sound. This was assigned 225. It was never done. It was never required to get done. We just have all this work that's not graded and like, so she's doing work. Okay, this is sloppy. I wouldn't accept this. This backwards J, this to me is not worthy of submitting. So she's bringing home this work. This is something she brought home. And I'm like, there's no grade on it. And it's not done well. At what point does an educator, okay, who is removing money from my bank account every single month, we have this whole system, busting my butt to pay for this school, work is coming home incompleted and not graded. How do we know how our progress is if we're not if we're not checking, if we're not getting to a checkpoint and saying, okay, Ayla Rose has mastered the long A sound. Ayla Rose has mastered the long. There was no accountability from the school. So we're required every month to make sure tuition is paid. Like this right here is ludicrous to me. This is absolutely insane. So we have 32 minus 10. Okay, cool. 39 minus 10. Okay, cool. All this is done. So we get over here and we have 59 minus 10 and the number is 9. Why is there not a big 0 and this required to be redone? Obviously, if we look at this, we say she does not know how to do this. I'm charging her parents $15,000 a year to learn this. Why is my child repeatedly bringing home work that was incomplete and not graded? There should have been a note in here. She needs to redo this at home. We ran out of time at school. She is not comfortable with subtraction. Let's go ahead and work on, like, she can't do it. Oh, well, let's move on to the next lesson. That was not the education that I was under the impression that I was paying for. Come over here to private school with the intent of, I'm going to give you money to give my child this advantage, to give her extra attention, the smaller class sizes, which the teacher told me out the gate the class size was too big. And I'm like, well, I can't control the class size, Miss Stewart. What do you want me to do about that? So in all, like, I mean, I cringe looking at my child's work. I cringe looking at this. My child is bringing home all this incomplete work, and these are skills she needs to know. Why are we not teaching the kids? So we go to the Adventure Science Center. It's 2 different first grade class. Miss Brown's class, the kids are cute. They're on the bus. They're out, hands behind their back, order, structure. Here comes Miss Stewart's class, the class we got stuck in. The kids are running all over the place, pushing, like it's like chaos. There's no classroom management. Okay, there's none of that. And so after the little field trip or whatever, we go and we sit down and we have me and some of the moms sit down. So some of Miss Brown's class, who was the more proficient class, the class I asked my daughter to be transferred to, and I was told no because people would talk. So the 2 first grade classes, we sit down. There's a couple parents from Miss Brown, a couple people from Miss Stewart, and Miss Brown's class is sounding out words like marinara and Parmesan. And there was not a single child in Mrs. Stewart's class who could read that menu. Okay? There was not a single first grader who could sound out any words on the menu. Names, obviously, and these parents, it's absolutely their prerogative how they want to handle the situation. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know of at least 5 kids in Ayla's first grade class who had tutors. 5 different children who needed tutors in first grade because they were not getting what they needed at the school. So for me, it was like on top of $1,500 a month of tuition, it was like $1,490 something, some change or whatever. So $1,500 a month in tuition. I'm expected to pay for a tutor, a daily, weekly, whatever tutor to come teach my child because you are not going to get what your child needs in the class. And for me, I was like, we're in the wrong school. Because my understanding is you go to these educators to get educated and we support at home. What you've learned, what they've introduced. I'm not saying, obviously we practice at home. I understand that. And that's a responsibility I took on as a parent. Anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes in the afternoon, from my perspective, was reasonable. Tutors. These children have tutors in first grade because they needed them because these kids could not read. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm not the spokesperson for how a child should be educated. But why are we busing children who cannot read to another state to do a field trip? Why are we not educating them on what, like, this is what they would send her home with. This was what she was working on in the second semester at Davidson Academy. This is what they had her doing the second semester at Davidson Academy. So that's cute. Let's see where their standards, okay? Not mine. Let's see where their standards are. Second quarter. They're supposed to be working on subtraction, okay? Keywords, word problems, and fact practice. Using the PSA strategy, keywords, fact fluency games, and practice. Intro to subtraction, subtract all, subtract zero, counting backwards, word problems and fact practice. 2D and 3D shapes, fractions, equal and unequal parts, counting and skip counting, plus minus 10, equal and unequal parts. I already said that. That's where they were supposed to be according to Davidson Academy. Again, this is not where I felt they should be. This is where Davidson Academy said that they should be. Okay? So keep that in mind. That's the second quarter for where they felt a child in first grade should be. Okay? That's what they had her working on. So my child's grades were all over the place. I mean, F's, it was all over the place. It was crazy. And I'm like, when were y'all going to either fail her? When were you going to move her up? Like what? And I talked to the principal about it. And I kept, she, why do you keep using this word failure? And I'm like, failing is failing. She is failing. My child was failing. Nobody was going to help her. When I talked to them, they recommended Hoover Learning Institute. There was never accountability. You guys were not educating my child. You never taught my child. And now we have a tutor because guess what? My kid's a grade level behind, and now we've had to hire a tutor. And the first thing my tutor said after doing a one-on-one session with Ayla and just working with her, she was like, it's not that she's not really smart. She's like, she was never taught in a systematical order. Your child was never taught. There's a way to teach kids. Davidson Academy did not implement. They have their own teaching method and strategy, and having looked through it, I actually really do believe this would work. But despite always paying tuition on time, this was not the education we received. So for whatever the reason, they decided to dumb down my child's education. You didn't even introduce her to the curriculum. How do we know if she can or cannot do fractions when she's only ever worked on addition? So, and quite frankly, it doesn't take all school year to learn addition. And I saw such a difference in my children's education the second day at the new school. The first day, everybody's new, everything's nervous. By the second day, my child's reading fluency had improved. And I'm like, when I told my daughter we were leaving Davidson Academy, she cried. And it was just, it was such a hard thing for my 6-year-old to understand. And one of the first things she said was, no, mommy, we don't just play all day, we do learn. And I was like, wow. So my child is aware of the fact that they play all day, and she's trying to make excuses for it. Maybe you want to go, maybe you already have some introduction, maybe whatever the case may be. Maybe you've had a phenomenal experience, and that is wonderful for you. We unfortunately were not given the same opportunity. They took her out of Davidson. We moved her to her new school out here, and she's thriving. Her reading has improved. We're back in kindergarten, and that was a very controversial, she was upset. The school was like, we've never done this before. But I ultimately made the decision to put her back in kindergarten because there was so little that she'd learned in kindergarten. It wasn't working. I couldn't put her in another first grade class. My child was so far behind, I could not even move her from Davidson Academy, second ranked private Christian school. Okay, so we've paid tuition. We've been there 2 years. Surely we should be able to move to another school, no problem, right? That assessment ate my kid up. I could not even put her in another first grade class. I had to put her back in kindergarten. And I'm like, this whole process has sucked. It's affected our whole life. Now we have a tutor. Now they go to school. We don't do extended care anymore. We've made the sacrifice. I work in the morning. I take 6 and 7 a.m. clients. I'll bring my kids home from school, work with them, leave them, and then go back to work. This has changed everything for us. My child, she is reading now, but as the time I moved her from Davidson Academy in February, she was not reading. She just turned 7 in April, and she was not reading. I didn't even get into this issue. This was a whole nother issue. So when I applied to Davidson Academy, I opted out of media releases. I don't think people should know where your children go to school. That is a huge safety concern. So mind you, I opted out of the media release, okay? I don't want my child where she goes to school, as I'm purposely not telling where my children go to school now. I don't want them to know where they go to school, okay? And I opted out of that for a reason, okay? That child that you did not help learn to read, that child that you said should go get evaluated because she wasn't progressing, was good enough to be in their little Davidson Academy newsletter. So she's good enough this little diverse child is good enough to go in a magazine. Why was she not good enough to be taught how to read? Why do you want people to think you have all this diversity? Which Ayla Rose in Miss Feaster's class was one of 2 children of color. Okay, there was 18 children in her kindergarten class. Her and one other little boy were the only children of color. Her first grade class, in a class of, it started with 17, even though the teacher was overrun and couldn't handle it, they brought 2 more kids in the school into the class. So there was 19 kids. She was the only out of 19. She is not a good representation of your school because they do not have diversity. She should not have been. One, I opted out of it and I said, don't post my child, and you put her in a magazine. But the second, she is not a good indication of the diversity of the school because they don't have any diversity in the school. They really don't. They don't. And that's something that, at least in the lower school, that's something you have to be okay with. I didn't love it. And I quickly found out it was not in my child's best interest. So my takeaway of this whole situation, just because you bust your butt to afford a seat at the table does not mean that's where you should stay. And that does not mean that's what's best for you or your kids. So I'm hoping that people will take all these lessons that I've learned. This was a very costly mistake. My child was pulled out of Davidson Academy in February of 2025 because she was not progressing. She was not given enrichment. She was not pulled aside and worked with privately. She was just pushed through. And even when I spoke to the teacher regarding this matter, her concern was, oh, we're not going to hold her back. She'll definitely go to 2nd grade. So we were going to keep pushing and forget teaching her how to read. Forget any of those things. We're just going to bump her up to the next grade. And despite repeatedly going up to the school, despite repeatedly talking to the teacher and the guidance counselor and the principal and the dean, there was no changes done. You know, they started implementing a weekly report, a piece of paper letting them know what they worked on with my child. Quite frankly, if they were adhering to their standards, again, not mine, their standards, I would know what she was doing because I have the benchmarks now. So that's something else I'd strongly encourage any parent, whether you do private, charter, whatever the case, whatever you decide is best for your child, pull the benchmarks for the school so you can follow along at home and make sure these people who are taking money from you are actually doing what they say they're doing. My child had repeat kindergarten. I know Miss Colley had a lot of stuff going on in her own personal life regarding her child and just everything that was going on. Her child actually graduated from Davidson Academy and take care of home first. Don't come to school. The principal of Davidson Academy lower school would come to school crying. Miss Colley was crying at school multiple times regarding what was happening with her daughter. Take a minute and go home and fix home. Don't come to school because quite frankly, Miss Stewart did fail my child, but so did Miss Colley because the oversight wasn't there because we have a whole, according to Miss Stewart, we had 7 of 12 kids failing in that class. Out of the 12 they tested that particular day, 7 of them were failing. So that's the time to say, hey, I got to take care of home, okay? If you're not able to watch your teachers, if you're not able to hold them accountable and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's not the time to come to school crying. It's not the time to have the classes in chaos because that's what it was. We were just dealt a really crappy hand. Our situation was really bad. To do it all over again, we never would have had Davidson Academy take thousands of dollars from us. And it was really a social club. It really wasn't an academic school. Or even like these things she was supposed to have mastered in kindergarten. They did not teach her that. They did not teach her that. And it's one thing if your child is not capable of learning. That's a whole separate issue. It's completely different when it was never taught. And watching my child as the homework was coming home, I'm kind of like, why are you coming home with this? And this is where you're supposed to be. So we were never given a fair chance. We were absolutely never given a fair chance. And why Davidson Academy looked at my child, looked her up and down and said she's not worth investing in, I am not sure. Even when I made the decision to pull my son out of Davidson, it was so like they wanted to reclassify him. I've never heard of reclassifying pre-K4. I've never heard of that. And 2 different teachers approached me about his actual teacher, and then also the teacher for junior kindergarten approached me about Messiah doing junior kindergarten versus doing K5. They said letter of the day, and then there was the same letter for the week, and there was no, that's a whole different video. I'm not even getting into that. Why you want to reclassify my little brown child because he's really good at sports, that's a whole separate issue. I'm not diving into that right now. So we made the decision to move Ayla back to K5, okay? Because of where we were at in Davidson and the lack of everything, we made the decision to put her back in kindergarten. So according to Davidson Academy, my child who couldn't read and needed all the support was given a phenomenal opportunity to go to a new school. My child read this 3 times and got 100, okay? This is what she's reading, okay? So chip, we have a ch, we have a ip, like church, cheese, chart, bright. She knew the silent G and H. She could not do this in February of this year. She could not read this in February of this year. She was reading this in May, okay? So we moved her from the second ranked private Christian school to the little neighborhood school over here. No time to play. The word time is a long I sound, so she can read long I's, know what the AY was. A day at the farm, Mark and Matt are twins. The twins like to go to granddad's house. She's reading all this. Mark, Matt, jobs, chicks. It's a lot of mostly short vowel sounds, but they have they have some long vowel sounds in there. Like time is a long I. She was able to read this. Dark, shine, that's another long I. She was able to read shine. She's able to read cheese. She's able to read mouse. She's able to read grain, safe, make, snack, real. My child could not read this in February. We have this sloppiness, okay? We're not being graded. We're not being checked. There's some stuff she can do, some stuff she can't, but who cares? Take tuition and send her home. She went from that sloppiness to this. Like, can we unpack that for a moment? I thought my child was incapable of reading, Davidson. I thought you told me that she's not able to retain information and all these other wonderful things you really shouldn't say about a child, but y'all were very comfortable saying it. That was cute. So we went from that to this. So this was her homework in first grade at Davidson Academy. Okay, this was her homework in first grade at Davidson Academy. The long I sound, pile, tile. This is what they had my child working on, okay? $15,000 a year, okay? This is where they had her. This was February. This is where she is now, okay? We went from that to this. Between the months of Davidson Academy had 2 years to get her here. 2 years. This is where her new school has gotten her. Between the last week of February, March, we took a week off for spring break. April, we were out, Easter, all those things. So we went from this in February to this in May. What do you guys think is a better return on your investment? I'm very curious. Like, I'm not sitting here bashing. I'm truly curious. Would you rather your child do this for $15,000 a year, or are we content with this? This is Davidson Academy had the audacity to charge me 15 grand for this foolishness. Okay, it's fun. You're gonna make friends. You're gonna graduate and walk across the stage, but your child may or may not know how to read. So you just have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with them publishing your child in a magazine, despite what the dean of the school said. You have to be okay with these things. You just have to suck it up and deal with it. You have to hire the tutors. You have to sacrifice whatever else you got going on because you need to be up here at this school making sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Ms. Jess said you did not teach her in a systematical order. So now my child can go through and finish sentences. She can mark the short vowels. She can do the special sounds. So we went from this monstrosity. So this is Davidson. Again, this is what they allow in first grade, because I would have put a big fat 0 over this and said, nice try, kid, do it again. This was first grade, okay? This was all school year what Miss Stewart was able to teach my child for 15 grand. This is what she's learned at her new school. Like, they're really, really stressing how to properly write your letters. None of this letters facing every way. She is required to put her name on the top. She is required to do proper punctuation. She's required to do proper capitalization. This is what I wanted. I'm not sure where the disconnect was between, hey, I want you to educate my child versus I want you to rob me. I don't know how things got a little misconstrued with that. I got this one incorrect. And how do I know that? Because the teacher marked it and required that she knows the right answer. I'm not asking to get my child to Harvard. I wanted you to make sure her letters were faced the correct way and teach her to read. Like, fluency that she jumped to so quickly. Like, she was always capable. And that was the big thing. She's progressed more in 4 months than she did all school year. And she moved back a grade. And she's still farther ahead now than they were ever able to get her. I mean, it's been a 180 with her learning experience. And now she's going to the library. She's getting books. Well, don't go off of what the school says they're going to do. Don't go off of any of those things. Go in your children's classroom. demand the benchmarks. I asked for the rubrics. I want to know how you're getting these grades, because this doesn't make any sense. This was probably the worst financial decision we ever made, and it's cost us thousands, and we've had to regroup and we've had to correct it now, and we're moving forward and things are a lot better. So we made the decision to move our child because of the lack of accountability. The lack of integrity is what shocked me. What her teacher would say with us versus what she'd say in front of the dean or in front of the principal, it was a complete difference. She didn't know her students at all. Like, that's where we're at. That was the experience we had at Davidson Academy. It was a very negative experience. It was a very lackluster pace. There was not enough education for me. There was not enough hands-on for me. There was no return on my investment. So that's it. We wanted to share our story, and I really want parents to be more knowledgeable when they go into these schools. Don't go off the ratings. Don't go off the reviews, because I wrote a bad review for Davidson Academy and they deleted it. So all the bad reviews, they just delete. So don't go off those reviews. Of course, they're going to leave up the positive ones. Don't go off the reviews online. Don't go off of word of mouth. Go sit in these classrooms. Go see what they're educating your children. Request the benchmarks. Request the rubrics. Get all of what you can to kind of see where your child is supposed to be, and then make your assessment on if they're where they need to be. Davidson Academy did not get my child where she needed to be, and nor were they going to make any attempts to do it. There was no resolution to the situation. My child left in tears. She was really upset to leave her friends. Those are the only friends she's ever known. It's the only school she's ever known. So that part was really, really hard on my 6-year-old. It was hard on all of us. We had to change, like our spring break week changed. I had to move client. Like, this affected, the education is so much bigger than the 8 to 3. It affects the whole family. So my son had to move. He had to make new friends. He had to get a new teacher. We had to change work schedule. Like, a lot went into this. So this was not I'm so angry I'm going to leave. This was literally, I have got to save this academic year. I'm so glad I left Davidson Academy. I made a lot of mistakes in my children's education, but the one thing I know I did right was leave that school. So I hope and pray that any involvement that you or your family might have regarding this school is a much more positive experience than we had, but ours was ridiculous. I am so disappointed in where our education is right now. So that's it. I really wanted to share our story. Hopefully our lesson will be maybe a lesson for someone else. If I can save someone a couple thousand, great. If I can save somebody time, if you're thinking about checking out the school, Miss Colley's crying. Dr. Judd is trying to figure out the school because he's new. Like, it was ridiculous. So not enough oversight. A teacher should never have a first grade class that's failing and the principals are running around crying. That should not happen. It was allowed. I did reach out to their board, but I guess they don't care either. They never reached back out. So I hope and pray these other kids in that first grade class, that this is not a stumbling block for them in the future, because they're lacking so much resources that they should have been giving in kindergarten and first grade. So wishing the best for the rest of the class. I mean, y'all got to do what you got to do. We did what we felt was right for our family. Zero regrets. To do it all over again, we never would have gone to the school. But that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Moving forward, hopefully the videos will be more positive and more exciting, but this was something I felt was only right to speak out on why we decided to homeschool and what we're doing now, and just, keeping my kids lifted up, and we're going to continue to move forward and we're going to continue to make progress. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be blessed.